I'm quickly introducing to you the White Matter Rounds network and what we are doing really to use national and international networks to advance both the clinical care and the research in leukodystrophies in general. Even though we are talking about this across the lifespan, my work is more centered on adult onset leukodystrophies. And in general, it started with this basic question that when you talk about white matter diseases, you always, in general, in medical school, they teach you that genetic white matter diseases, leukodystrophies, are most prevalent in the pediatric population. When you see a patient, an adult patient with white matter abnormalities, you need to think first at the multiple sclerosis spectrum, and later on in life, there are the vascular comorbidities that play a role and cause the most frequent white matter disorders. However, this is not the case all the time, and we are seeing an increasing number of patients with adult onset leukodystrophy which are not diagnosed as such, that are followed in inappropriate clinics where there is no expertise. And as you well know, I don't need to spend time on this slide, the impact on patients and on entire families is huge, because they are exposed to inappropriate treatments, or they are missing the opportunity to receive an appropriate disease-specific treatment, because the misdiagnosis or the undiagnosis can last forever, and because there is a missed opportunity to receive proper genetic counseling and prenatal diagnosis. So what we did is that back in 2013, when I was a PhD student interested in genetic white matter diseases, we decided to launch these white matter rounds, which were initially local case discussions held at the Montreal Neurological Institute, in which, as you can see in the photo, included MS clinicians, geneticists, radiologists, students like me. But by word of mouth, basically, by talking with other clinicians and neurologists in Canada and then abroad, we started noticing that everyone had to deal with patients that could not be diagnosed with the regular techniques and with regular investigations that are available in the clinical context, because they have super rare presentations. So to make a long story short, the white matter rounds, we moved the rounds from in-person to online, and this became a growing network. So we started in Montreal, then Ottawa joined, then Finland, then UC. Now we are more than 21 centers around the world. We are aiming really to expand even further, because there are some areas of the world that are not yet included. But imagine this as really a big network that meet every single month for 1 hour to discuss patients who are not diagnosed. Yeah, Australia is one of the last centers that joined us. So that clearly this was not easy to control and to coordinate only by email. So we launched this platform in which members, this is done for everyone, so everyone can access it. But there is a protected area where all the cases discussed, which are clearly anonymized, de-identified, you can click on that and you can see previous videos of recorded case discussions, and you can access the information of previous cases to facilitate the data sharing and to facilitate the identification of cases that are super rare. It's not just a network that we want to do for the clinicians or the trainees. As you see, the LCC Foundation is partner, and hopefully we will be showcasing them on our website soon. But patients' organizations are partners. Maybe you recognized some of these names. And we invite patients' foundations to join our meetings, where they can introduce their association, they can present their work, they can connect with clinicians worldwide. This is when Riham Badawi, who is the president and founder of ALD Hope, presented, I think 1 year ago approximately. And other goals of the network is not just to discuss cases which resist diagnosis, but it is also to create guidelines and consensus statement to how investigate patients with this difficult diagnosis or with super rare conditions. So that's what we did. The other thing that, of course, this network facilitates is that we can put together cases. So the MRI of the patient that you see here was a special situation in which we presented a case from Canada, from Quebec, and people from Beirut in Lebanon said, wait a minute, we have a case that is very similar. So we were able to get the DNA shipped. We were able to analyze together the DNA of these two patients, and now we have the diagnosis for them. So this is just an example of why these networks can really facilitate both the clinical and the research in leukodystrophies. And finally, we move from the clinical to go more to the basic science because we can generate data that can really help us understand the pathophysiology, the mechanisms of these disorders. This is just the neuroradiological consensus that we just published because, again, we put together this within the network. We now have a proposed protocol. So there were some questions, I think, this morning where you mentioned the MRI. Some people mentioned the MRI and how, when faced with rare diseases, if you are in a remote area, if you are in a center where they are not expert in the disease, they don't even know exactly what is the protocol to correctly study a patient, for example, with LCC, which is with cysts. So what do they do? So that's why we did a consensus, and now it is published. We have a proposed protocol on how people everywhere, every center around the world can use to do the proper MRI to investigate these patients. This is what we do internationally. Few words about what we are doing at the Canadian level. 2 years ago, we launched the CARE-LUCO. It was an idea of Geneviève Bernard, who is the director of this initiative. So CARE-LUCO is the Canadian Association for Research Excellence in Leukodystrophy. Why we needed to do that? Because we clearly identified the major gaps in the field. These, for brevity, I will not go over all of them, but that these are common gaps in the field of leukodystrophies everywhere in the world, but Canada has specific gaps. One is the geographic landscape. The majority of the population of Canada is only 30 million. We are almost all concentrated in the 2-3 big metropolitan areas, but patients are everywhere. So, and I know because I recognize some names in the call, we are constantly presented with the difficulty with the challenge of properly diagnosing patients with leukodystrophies when they are not located near Montreal, Vancouver, or Toronto. So that's the reason why we created CARE-LUCO. Every Canadian patient in the call, please, if you want, just reach out to us. We are happy to provide you with more information to connect you with the specialists in Canada. Definitely CARE-LUCO has some specific aims. One is to increase the diagnostic yield, so to accelerate the diagnosis of patients who still remain without the diagnosis. The second aim is disease modeling, is really to understand the mechanisms that cause the diseases. And the third one is really more about natural history study and clinical trial readiness. As with the white matter rounds, we do that in close partnership with patients. These are some photos from our second symposium where patients had really a central spot. They presented, we had 2 presentations from patients, but we also had a roundtable where patients could really discuss and answer questions from clinicians who didn't know how to address the specific problems that only families can bring up. So this is what I wanted to tell you. The conclusions is that international and national open science networks are essentials in rare diseases and specifically in leukodystrophies, and they can really be helpful to accelerate the diagnostic process, to prevent misdiagnosis, and to facilitate the collaborative research and care of patients. So with this, I thank all the patients, all the families, or the associations, and these are our funding sources. And thank you. I'm happy to take questions.